to join the debate. The honourable member for Calgary-Beddington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise to speak in opposition to Bill 2, a bill that will force teachers and students back into classroom environments that do not support the learning needs of our kids or the ability for educators to be effective teachers. The degradation of our once world-class public education system has been years in the making, and the culprit for this can be easily found in this Premier's direction to her Finance Minister. The mantra of the UCP has long been to keep government spending below population growth and inflation. This phrase has been thrown around casually in every mandate letter this Premier has issued to her Finance Minister, and yet I have never heard this government speak openly to Albertans about what this means. I have not heard them tell Albertans directly that this means the services they receive will worsen, that they will wait longer to receive life-saving health care, or that the path towards the lowest education funding per student in the country was no accident, but instead a deliberate path this government has driven us down, regardless of the wishes of Albertans. Madam Chair, Bill 2's actions fail to recognize the reality of what is happening in our classrooms. I have hundreds of stories from teachers desperately pleading with this government to recognize the reality of what is happening in our schools. But we are tight for time because this government doesn't believe in fulsome debate on this issue. So I will give just a few examples. Lynn, who has been teaching for 8 years, wrote to tell me about declining conditions at her school. 8 years ago, as a full-time music teacher, Lynn was able to teach each class of students 2 to 3 times a week, giving them continuous enrichment in music while also providing classroom teachers with prep time, along with other specialists in the school. Over the years, as per-student funding has decreased, Lynn's role has shifted, and the school she works at has lost specialists one by one. First French, then English language, then gifted. Each cut reduced the programming and supports for the kids at that school. Lynn is now only able to teach music half-time, with the other half of her time spent on standard classroom teaching, but of course still being expected to maintain the entire K-6 music program and its ancillary activities such as school concerts. Students only have music once a week now, instead of 2 or 3 times. And Madam Chair, if there are members of this House who fail to understand the value of music education, those members also fail to understand the value of math and the work that music does to reinforce critical learning on things like patterns, ratios, sequences, in addition to all the benefits that music brings to develop verbal memory, reading ability, and executive brain function. Bill 2 fails to address the teaching conditions that are our kids' learning conditions. Jessica is a teacher who struggles to provide meaningful instruction, individual support, and safe, engaging learning environments to her class of 30 11-year-olds. Wow. In that class, 11 students have an individual learning plan, many who have multiple learning disabilities. 9 of her students require assistive technology to write, which the school lacks in sufficient quantity to support those students. 7 students are reading below grade level, and 10 struggle significantly in math. Jessica teaches without the support of an education assistant, despite these complex needs in her classroom. It is clear that Jessica is not able to meet the needs of the kids in her class. Lisa wants this government to know that as a 10-year teacher, last year was the worst year she has ever seen when it comes to class size and composition. In addition to teaching 2 curriculums for grade 5 and 6, she has 9 students in her class with individual learning plans, 5 severe undiagnosed behavior students, 1 conduct disorder, 1 oppositional defiance disorder, and 2 children who require significant language supports. Bill 2 will send these teachers and their students back into exactly the same classroom environment they left 3 weeks ago. There will be no additional mental health supports for these students. There will be no additional education support workers. There will be no changes whatsoever to the class size and complexity in any of these classrooms. Of the hundreds of letters, emails, and calls I have received from teachers during this strike, every single one spoke to the condition of their classroom, to the unmet needs of the children they are responsible for. And yet, if you follow the narrative of this government, you would think that tens of thousands of teachers have walked out in protest over salary. This government has tried so desperately to spin this strike as teachers' greed. And I want to be clear here that teachers and all workers deserve wage increases that keep up with the cost of living that has done nothing but rise under this government's tenure. The fact of the matter is that over the last decade, teacher salaries have risen only 5%, while cost of living has climbed 30%.
Wow.
It is not asking for the moon to be fairly compensated for a complex and demanding job. However hard this government may try to spin it otherwise, but this strike is not primarily about salary. It is about the conditions in our classroom. Now, I know this government has had a hard time understanding what teachers want. For weeks, they publicly lamented how very difficult it was to figure out something I have had 10-year-old children sum up in a single sentence. Quote, "My class is so full, it's hard to move around in. Not all the kids get the help they need. My teacher is stressed and needs more help." End quote. When even a child is better able to grasp what is going on in a classroom than the adults in this room, it is fair to ask, is this ignorance, incompetence, or is this by design? Bill 2 makes it crystal clear that it is by design. The offer that is being forced on teachers with Bill 2 is the exact same offer that was rejected just a few weeks ago by 90% of teachers. Bill 2 makes it crystal clear that this government was never bargaining in good faith with teachers, because bargaining is a negotiation that requires both parties to come to the table with an ability to compromise. Bill 2 makes it crystal clear that it wasn't that this government didn't know what teachers wanted, it is that they didn't care what teachers wanted. Bill 2 is this government's response to a problem of their own making. The choice this government has made to fund education at the lowest level per student in the country, that choice comes with consequences. That choice has led to the growing class sizes that add to a teacher's workload. That choice has led to a lack of resources to support complex learners. That choice has resulted in a desperate lack of learning spaces, meaning that even if we had a government who was willing to properly fund education, we literally don't have enough classrooms to accommodate all Alberta students. Now look, the UCP has promised $8.6 billion in funding to correct their own failure to plan for the needs of Alberta students. Let's put to the side for a moment that this is merely a promise, that this government has not communicated how they plan to build so many schools in such a short time frame. We won't forget about this, but let's just put it to the side for the moment. Bill 2 forces teachers back into classroom conditions that have worsened over years, and I'm going to use just a single school board as an example, though there are many others that I could have given you if we had been allowed an appropriate amount of time to debate this bill. The CBE is Alberta's largest school board, serving over 140,000 Alberta students. Although this government likes to pretend that population growth just snuck up on us, in fact, you can watch CBE system utilization rise steadily over 5 years, from 83% in 2021 to 87% in 2022, 92% in 2023 to 95% in 2024. If they don't hit 100% this year, it will be next year. And I will remind you, Madam Chair, that once a school hits 85%, they are actually full. Beyond 85%, a school starts to lose spaces. Libraries, gym stages, boot rooms, hallways, these must all become classrooms. So in that time, when Alberta's largest school board was growing at this steady, constant pace, over the last 6 years, how many new schools were approved by this government for construction funding for this school board? 4. Well, okay, technically 5, but one of the construction projects that was approved in 2023 still hasn't started construction. It is literally an empty field. Now, interestingly, in 2023, the CBE opened the single high school that was provided construction funding over the last 6 years. North Trail High School was full the day it opened, and students who could literally walk to school are instead being overflowed to a school that requires a daily 90-minute transit commute. Today, CBE high schools operate at 108% capacity, and the earliest a new high school will open for this board is 2030. It is a shocking failure to plan for the needs of Calgary students. So look, this government, they love to crow about that $8.6 billion promise, a promise that they may or may not keep, when it's really just a clear sign of this government's abject failure to plan for Alberta's future. I'll remind you, Madam Chair, that the Alberta NDP built or modernized 244 schools over our 4-year term in government, and this government hasn't managed close to even half of that in their 6 years in office. Above all things, Madam Chair, I am a mother. And for many years, my kids have attended our local public elementary school. Like many schools in my riding, the building is 50 years old. It was designed for a different type of education, a different type of student, sitting quietly in rows, if you can imagine that. The only classroom in the building that has a door is the kindergarten classroom. All the other kids learn in open concept wings where the sound moves freely between the 4 classes housed in each wing. When I started on parent council, I asked what could be done about noise dampening. And the principal was blunt with me. They had a study done, and the cost was $1 million. But it didn't even crack the top 10 list of improvements the school board was able to fund. It probably didn't even crack the top 50, because all the funding available for operations and maintenance at existing schools has to be spent on roofs, HVAC systems, and fire suppression updates. All the bits and pieces that age out and need to be replaced in an older building. There is no money available to create a suitable learning environment for the kids at this school. Over nearly a decade, I watched conditions in this school slide. Class sizes crept up, which meant so did the noise. Parents were increasingly asked to fundraise for what I thought were foundational items for a classroom. Without parent fundraising, this school would not have smart boards in every classroom. We would not have had more than one classroom set of laptops. We would have half the books that currently live in the library. No field trips, no little rubber balls on the chair legs to bring down the volume of kids scraping their chairs back and forth, no trees in the schoolyard, no nets in the soccer goals, no adaptive technology for kids who need support with writing, and no robotics program because parents had to pay for all of that technology.
Shame.
These little things add up. And then in the last 2 years, the big stuff hit. 2 years ago, 3 nonverbal autism spectrum disorder students walked through the door of this, their local public school, who did what public schools do best: opened their arms and welcomed them in. Those students needed support, so a teacher was let go to free up the budget to bring 2 EAs into the school. Just 2 EAs, mind you, not 3, even though clearly 3 were needed. But they couldn't afford 3. So I had to make do with 2. Now this year, the kindergarten class, well, they got the boot from their special room, the only room with a door, the only room in the school that provides the kind of space kids need to help process the transition of starting school. But the school needs the space for the complex students. And as I mentioned, it's the only room with a door. So into a split kindergarten, grade 1 class, those kids go. Wow. No one is being served in this scenario. Not the teachers, not the support workers, and certainly not the students. Madam Chair, Bill 2 forces teachers back to work when it is this government who has been failing to work in the interests of Albertans for years. And how do we know what Albertans want? Well, they have made it pretty clear, Mr. Speaker. My office has received thousands of calls, emails, letters, pop-ins, a fraction of what the Minister and Premier have received, I'm sure, and overwhelmingly, Albertans, whether they be parents, grandparents, educators, or students, have gone to every length to tell this government that they want a negotiated solution to this strike that will address class size and complexity. 3,000 Albertans protested this government at the McDougall Centre 3 weeks ago. 8,000 Albertans protested this Premier during a Chamber speech 2 weeks ago, and 30,000 Albertans stood outside the legislature just last week to send a message that they want to see real action from this government to prioritize public education. And what Albertans have received in response is a government who put in their earplugs and bullied us all down their predetermined path that will not substantively address learning conditions in our classroom. Bill 2 prevents us from talking about the most important thing, the thing that is on the mind of all Albertans, that our public education system is crumbling under the gross mismanagement of this government. That the thing that draws parents toward private education options, namely small class sizes, is not something that this government is willing to prioritize for the 95% of Alberta students who attend a public school. This government stopped collecting data on school sizes, for Pete's sake. Why? Is it possible that this government feels ashamed of their actions? Like a toddler who knows he's done a terrible thing and runs to hide under his blankie to avoid the consequences of his decision. Of course, the worst the toddler likely did was break a vase, not a public education system that serves over 700,000 students. Bill 2 is a gross violation of workers' rights to collective bargaining. It forces teachers and students back into overcrowded classrooms, and it does absolutely nothing to address the classroom conditions that our kids learn in. I encourage all members of this House to vote against this bill. And I would like to introduce an amendment, Madam Chair.
Wire.
Well, we're lucky. It's
You have 25 seconds to move it. Once I tell you, you can move it.
past my bedtime. I'm sorry. I'm really, really doing the best I can.
Honourable members, this will be known as Amendment A1. Honourable member, you may proceed.
Thank you. Move that Bill 2 Back to School Act be amended by striking out Section 3. The use of the notwithstanding clause to force teachers back to work is one of the greatest abuses of democratic rights in Alberta's history. Instead of listening to the teachers, parents and students who have been sounding the alarm about the crisis in public education, this government is forcing teachers back to work with an offer that was overwhelmingly rejected.
Well done, honourable member. I see the Honourable Minister of Education rising to speak to the amendment.